The applause inside the clubhouse was so loud I could hear it from half a mile away. Champagne glasses clinked, a live jazz band played. More than 200 HOA members were celebrating the grand opening of what they proudly called their new community clubhouse. At exactly 7:30 p.m., I drove my yellow bulldozer through the front gate. Not to destroy their party, not to intimidate anyone. I came to reclaim my pasture, because the building sitting under those fancy lights had been constructed on my land, and every person at that gala was about to learn a very expensive lesson about property rights. My name is Caleb Turner. I'm a fourth-generation cattle rancher outside the town of Red Creek. My family has worked the same ranch for nearly 80 years. My grandfather cleared the original fields with horses. My father expanded the grazing land. I modernized the operation, adding rotational grazing, new fencing, and better irrigation. But one thing never changed. Every acre mattered, especially the east pasture. To most people, it looked like an ordinary stretch of grass. To me, it was one of the most productive grazing areas on the ranch. Nearly 30 acres of open pasture, healthy soil, reliable drainage, easy equipment access. It wasn't glamorous, but it was valuable. Then, about 4 years ago, a luxury subdivision called Willow Crest Estates was built directly beside my eastern fence line. With the subdivision came an HOA. At first, we got along just fine. They stayed on their side. I stayed on mine. We exchanged friendly waves. That was enough. Then a new HOA president was elected. Her name was Vanessa Collins. Vanessa believed every problem had a simple solution, usually one that involved someone else making a sacrifice. The subdivision had one major complaint: no clubhouse. Residents wanted a fitness room, a banquet hall, a pool, meeting rooms, outdoor event space. The developer had promised all of it, then went bankrupt before construction ever began. Now homeowners blamed the HOA. The HOA blamed the developer, and Vanessa promised she'd fix everything. The problem? There wasn't enough land left inside the subdivision. Every remaining lot had already been sold. Except, from the neighborhood entrance, my east pasture looked like empty, unused land. It wasn't. It simply looked that way to people who didn't raise cattle. One afternoon, Vanessa drove onto the ranch. She smiled as though we'd known each other for years. "Mr. Turner, Caleb, I have an exciting opportunity." I already knew I wasn't going to like it. She unfolded a colorful site plan across the hood of my truck. "We'd love to purchase this section." She pointed directly at my pasture. I glanced at the map, then back at her. "No," she blinked. "You haven't even heard the offer." "I heard enough." She laughed politely. "We're prepared to pay market value. It isn't for sale." "What if we doubled it?" "No." She looked genuinely surprised. "Why?" "Because I use it." "For cows?" "Yes." She looked across the pasture. "They could graze somewhere else." I smiled. "And your clubhouse could be built somewhere else?" She didn't appreciate that answer. Before leaving, she said, "I hope you'll reconsider." "I won't." For several months, nothing happened. Or so I thought. Then one afternoon, Eli, my ranch foreman, drove toward the barn much faster than usual. "You need to see this." "What happened?" "Survey flags." My stomach tightened. "What kind of survey flags?" "The kind sitting in your pasture." We drove there immediately. Bright orange stakes stretched across nearly 5 acres. Someone had spray-painted construction markings on the grass. I pulled one stake out of the ground. There wasn't a company name, only lot numbers. Then I noticed something else: heavy equipment tracks, fresh ones. Someone had already been measuring the land. The following morning, I visited the county planning office. The employee searched several records, then frowned. "That's strange." "What?" "We have clubhouse construction permits." "For where?" She turned the monitor toward me. I stared. The approved site plan showed my pasture. My pasture, not HOA land. Mine. "There has to be a mistake." She looked closer. "There definitely is." Apparently, someone had submitted outdated development maps from years earlier, maps created before my grandfather purchased additional acreage and officially combined the parcels decades ago. The modern property records clearly showed the land belonged to me. The permit application didn't. Somehow, nobody had caught the mistake. I asked the obvious question. Has construction started? She looked again. Not officially. I thanked her and drove home. That afternoon, I called a property attorney. His advice surprised me. Don't interfere. What? If they're preparing to build without verifying ownership, let them continue documenting every step. You want me to let them build? I want them to reveal exactly how far they're willing to go. It sounded crazy, but legally, it made sense. So I waited. Every day my cameras recorded more activity. Excavators, concrete trucks, contractors, framing crews, brick deliveries, roofing crews, landscaping. Everything happened inside my property line. Everything. I documented every stage, drone footage, survey comparisons, time-stamped videos, daily photographs. The evidence folder grew thicker every week. Friends thought I was losing my mind. You aren't stopping them? No. Why? Because they're digging a much deeper hole than the foundation. 6 months later, the clubhouse was finished. It looked impressive. Stone entrance, large ballroom, fitness center, outdoor terrace, swimming pool. Residents praised Vanessa for making the impossible happen. Local newspapers even called it a community success story. Every article forgot one tiny detail. The building wasn't on HOA property. It was sitting squarely in the middle of my pasture. Then came the invitation. Someone accidentally placed one in my mailbox. Willow Crest Estates Annual Gala celebrating our new clubhouse Saturday, 7 p.m., black tie, dinner, live music, fireworks. I smiled the moment I finished reading it, because my attorney looked at the invitation and said exactly 4 words. Perfect timing. I rented a bulldozer, not to knock down the building, not without a court order, just to make sure everyone finally noticed who actually owned the land. And at exactly 7:30 p.m., while the gala was in full swing, I slowly drove that bulldozer toward the clubhouse entrance. What happened next would become the most unforgettable HOA meeting in county history. At exactly 7:30 that Saturday evening, I turned the key. The bulldozer rumbled to life. Its diesel engine echoed across the pasture. I wasn't moving fast, barely walking speed. There was no reason to rush. After all, I'd waited almost 7 months already. Another 5 minutes wouldn't make much difference. As I approached the clubhouse, I could see the parking lot overflowing with luxury cars. A valet stood near the entrance. Strings of decorative lights stretched across the courtyard. A jazz band played beneath a white canopy. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns laughed while servers carried trays of champagne. It looked like the biggest social event Willow Crest Estates had ever hosted. None of them noticed me at first. The music was too loud, the conversations too lively. Then one valet pointed toward the pasture. Heads started turning. Within seconds, dozens of people were staring. Not because I was driving recklessly. I wasn't. I simply parked the bulldozer 20 feet from the front entrance, lowered the blade until it rested on the ground, shut off the engine, and climbed down. The silence that followed was almost surreal. Vanessa Collins came rushing out of the clubhouse. Her smile disappeared the moment she recognized me. "Caleb! Good evening? What are you doing?" "I came to check on my pasture." She looked around as though expecting someone to explain the joke. "This is our clubhouse." I shook my head. "No. It absolutely is. The building may be yours." I pointed toward the ground beneath it. "The land isn't." Several board members stepped outside. Then more residents followed. Within minutes, nearly everyone from the gala was standing in the courtyard. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" Another answered, "I think that's the ranch owner." Vanessa folded her arms. "If this is some kind of protest, it isn't. Then why bring a bulldozer? To get everyone's attention. She glanced at the machine. Are you threatening us? No. If I intended to threaten you, I looked at the idling bulldozer. I wouldn't have parked it. That answer made several people noticeably uncomfortable. My attorney, Richard Hale, walked across the parking lot carrying a leather briefcase. He'd arrived separately, exactly as planned. Vanessa recognized him immediately. You brought a lawyer? Richard smiled politely. I brought paperwork. He handed her a thick envelope. She opened it. The first page was a certified property survey. The second contained the recorded deed. The third showed county parcel maps. The fourth displayed GPS boundary coordinates. Every document said the same thing. The clubhouse sat on Turner Ranch property. Vanessa looked at the pages, then back at me, then at the pages again. This can't be right, Richard answered calmly. It is. One homeowner stepped forward. We bought this from the HOA. Richard looked at him. You bought a membership? The HOA never owned this land? The crowd became noticeably quieter. Someone else asked, So, who does? I raised my hand. I do. Another resident frowned. Then why didn't you stop construction? That question had been coming for months. Richard answered before I could. Because Mr. Turner repeatedly informed the association that the land wasn't for sale. Several people turned toward Vanessa. She looked uncomfortable. Richard continued. When construction began, we documented every stage. He opened another folder. Inside were hundreds of photographs, drone footage, time-stamped security videos, daily construction records, copies of emails, certified letters, survey reports, everything. The evidence table grew larger with every document he removed. One resident quietly asked, You knew? I nodded. I knew exactly what was happening. Another resident looked confused. Then why let us finish? Richard spoke again. Because stopping construction physically could have created unnecessary conflict. He paused. Documentation creates clarity. Vanessa suddenly interrupted. We had permits. Richard nodded. You did. So the county approved it? They approved construction. He slid another document across the table, using outdated parcel maps. The county corrected that mistake 3 weeks ago. Her face turned pale. You knew? They notified us. You didn't tell us. Richard looked directly at her. They sent notice to the address listed on your permit application. Silence. One board member slowly turned toward Vanessa. You received it? She didn't answer. That silence spoke loudly enough. Just then, flashing lights appeared at the entrance. 2 sheriff's deputies pulled into the parking lot. Not because I'd called about a crime, because I'd requested a civil standby earlier that afternoon. Whenever emotions run high, it's better to have neutral witnesses. Deputy Harris stepped out. Evening, folks. He recognized me immediately. Mr. Turner. Deputy. He looked toward the clubhouse. This the property dispute? Yes. Richard handed him copies of the survey and deed. The deputy spent several minutes reviewing them. Then he compared the legal description to the county GIS map on his patrol computer. Finally, he looked up. The property line matches. Vanessa stepped forward. This building belongs to the HOA. Deputy Harris answered carefully. The building may belong to whoever paid for it. He paused. But it's standing on Mr. Turner's land. The crowd went completely silent. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered on the stone walkway. Nobody even looked down. Every eye remained fixed on the deputy. Then another vehicle arrived. County planning. The senior surveyor climbed out carrying a long tube of rolled maps. Apparently, Richard had invited him too. The surveyor greeted everyone politely, then walked directly into the courtyard. He placed a large aerial map on one of the banquet tables. Using bright markers, he traced the legal property boundary. The line cut directly through the clubhouse. Actually, not through it. Around it. The entire structure sat inside my parcel. Every inch. The swimming pool, the ballroom, the fitness center, even the decorative fountain. None of it crossed onto HOA land. The room became so quiet you could hear the wind moving through nearby oak trees. One homeowner finally asked the question everyone was thinking. Does that mean... The surveyor nodded before he finished. Yes. The clubhouse was built on private property. Vanessa looked like she couldn't breathe. She grabbed the edge of a table for support. Then she looked at me. What happens now? I glanced toward Richard. He smiled slightly. That depends. On what? Whether the HOA wants to solve this reasonably. He closed the folder. Or explain everything to a judge. No one spoke. Not a single person. Because for the first time that night, everyone realized the bulldozer had never been the real problem. The paperwork was. And once this case reached court, the value of that beautiful clubhouse would become the least expensive part of the lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed the following Monday. Contrary to what many people expected, my attorney didn't ask the court for permission to demolish the clubhouse. Not immediately. Courts generally prefer practical solutions before drastic ones, and Richard knew that. Instead, we asked for three things. First, a declaration confirming ownership of the land. Second, compensation for the unauthorized use of my pasture and the damage caused during construction. Third, an injunction preventing the HOA from using the building until the ownership dispute was resolved. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing only 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Residents from Willowcrest Estates filled nearly every seat. Some came to support the HOA. Others simply wanted answers. Local reporters sat along the back wall. County planning officials attended as witnesses. Even several contractors who had worked on the clubhouse appeared after receiving subpoenas. When the hearing began, Richard stood and placed a large survey map before the court. Your Honor, he said, this case is not complicated. The facts are. He pointed to the property line. The clubhouse was built entirely on Mr. Turner's land. The judge studied the map, then looked toward the HOA's attorney. Do you dispute the survey? The attorney stood slowly. No, Your Honor. That answer changed the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. For months, residents had believed ownership would somehow be debated. It wasn't. The land belonged to me. That fact was no longer in dispute. The county surveyor testified next. He explained that outdated development maps had mistakenly been attached to the permit application. The planning office approved construction based on incorrect parcel information. When updated records were reviewed, the error became obvious. The judge asked an important question. Did updated county records exist before construction began? Yes. And would those records have shown the correct owner? They would have. So this mistake could have been avoided? Absolutely. Next came the contractors. The project manager explained that his company had relied entirely on the paperwork provided by the HOA. No one ever told us the land belonged to Mr. Turner. If we had known, he added, construction would have stopped immediately. Then Richard presented the evidence we'd spent months collecting. Drone footage taken every week, time-stamped security videos, photographs documenting every stage of construction, certified copies of letters offering to discuss the boundary issue, emails that had gone unanswered, delivery records, survey notes. By the time he finished, the evidence filled an entire display table. The judge quietly remarked, "This is one of the most thoroughly documented property cases I've seen." Then Vanessa Collins took the stand. She admitted she had negotiated to buy the pasture months earlier. She admitted I refused to sell. She admitted construction continued after that refusal. Her attorney tried to argue that everyone involved genuinely believed the land belonged to the HOA. The judge listened carefully, then asked, "After Mr. Turner declined to sell the property, why didn't the association order a new boundary survey?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said quietly, "We trusted the original plans." The judge nodded. But you didn't verify them. No. That single word carried enormous weight. The hearing lasted 2 full days. At the end, the judge recessed to review the evidence. A week later, everyone returned for the ruling. The courtroom was silent. The judge began by confirming that Turner Ranch was the legal owner of the property beneath the clubhouse. He found that the HOA had occupied private land without authorization. He also concluded that reasonable verification of ownership would have prevented the entire dispute. Then came the question everyone had been asking. What would happen to the clubhouse? The judge explained that demolition was possible, but courts should avoid unnecessary waste when another lawful solution exists. Instead, he ordered the HOA to negotiate one of 2 outcomes within 90 days. Either purchase the land from me at a court-approved market value plus additional compensation for unauthorized use and restoration costs, or remove the clubhouse at the HOA's expense and restore the pasture to its previous condition. The courtroom became very quiet. Either option would cost the HOA millions, but the choice would be theirs. The judge also ordered the association to reimburse my legal expenses and pay damages related to the unauthorized occupation and loss of use of the pasture. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded everyone. I declined interviews. There wasn't much left to say. The ruling spoke for itself. Over the next several weeks, Willowcrest Estates held multiple special meetings. Residents studied the numbers. Demolishing the clubhouse would be enormously expensive. Buying the land would also be expensive, but the building itself represented a significant investment. After long debates, the membership voted. The HOA would purchase the acreage beneath the clubhouse and the surrounding land necessary for parking and utilities. The agreement closed several months later. The ranch received fair market value, compensation ordered by the court, and funds to improve fencing and grazing land elsewhere on the property. The HOA finally owned the clubhouse, legally, exactly the way it should have happened from the beginning. A few weeks after everything was finalized, I ran into one of the residents at a local hardware store. He smiled awkwardly. "You know," he said, "this all could have been avoided." I nodded. It could have. If we just checked the property lines first, that would have saved everyone a lot of money. He laughed. Probably the most expensive survey nobody ever ordered. He wasn't wrong. Months later, I drove past the clubhouse. Families were enjoying the pool. Children played on the lawn. Neighbors gathered on the patio. Seeing that didn't bother me, because the issue had never been the building. It had been respect. Respect for boundaries. Respect for ownership. Respect for asking before taking. Sometimes the strongest foundation for any community isn't concrete. It's making sure you know exactly where your property ends and your neighbor's begins. How would you like the HOA stories? Please like, share, and subscribe my YouTube channel for more HOA interesting stories.